Well, and also I think like if it doesn't turn into a like revolution as we've seen before, that in itself will tell us something about,
yes.
American society or history or,
Right. And then again, maybe it will all just peter out, which I don't think is going to happen, though, because we have a number of other factors at our display. If it was just Trump, it would just be like, this motherfucker. But, everything else is great. So clearly the next biggest thing is COVID-19, which is, you don't get things like the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution without without these kind of like environmental shocks, right? Whether it's famine, an overly cold winter, people freezing, people can't afford bread, people can't afford fuel for their fires, like whatever it is, or like a literal plague, which is what we're dealing with. This is a natural biological environmental factor that is just a complete wild card that has been thrown into the mix of an already, and I'll get into this later, but like an already pretty broken and fractured society has now been hit with this like biological environmental catastrophe, which is a plague that has forced everybody to stay home. It has resulted in, massive job losses. It has resulted in massive insecurity. People are trapped inside their homes.
Depression,
the service economy, the entertainment economy. People aren't making TV shows. People aren't making movies. Many of the things that we rely on to sort of keep the liquid capital of the country moving and paying each other. Like we're getting money, receiving money, and then spending money to keep the economy going. That all just sort of ground to a halt, which of course was all made worse by Donald Trump, who is incompetent and who aggressively decided to respond with massive amounts of disinformation and neglect, which made the entire thing worse.
You mean you haven't found the bleach to be helpful?
No, I have not found the bleach to be helpful. I have not found Donald Trump to be helpful. And I live in France right now, which is, you could say like, so we did everything. I mean, I did a 23-hour a day lockdown in Paris, France, in a 50 square meter apartment with my wife and 2 kids. And it was rough. Let me tell you, we all love each other, but it was hard. And it's not like the French or the European Union did anything perfectly. And we're probably right now having the second wave that everybody predicted, and school's about to start here, and we're going to see what that's like. But point being that it was handled quite a bit better here than it was in the United States. And this has, proven again how unfit Trump is personally for office. But like the economic shock of this is like unlike anything we've ever seen, kind of. My big issue is that if you back up 10 years, we go back 10 years, where are we at? We're at the 2008 economic crisis. I don't believe that the United States ever recovered from the 2008 economic crisis, financial crisis. You can see by any measure the sort of the recovery that the country allegedly had. Most of those gains, most of that new wealth, most of that new money and recovery money went to investors. It went to people who already had capital. It went to sort of the 1% of the United States of America. They are the ones who gained the most. The vast majority of workers, the vast majority of people in the middle classes and lower classes saw their wages stagnate. They certainly didn't go up, and many oftentimes went down. The jobs that then became available to make it look like the unemployment rate is lower now and people are having their jobs back. Those jobs are riskier. Those jobs are less secure. Those jobs come with less pay and fewer benefits. They come, we have moved towards this gig economy that has started to absorb large parts of the workforces. So you can say, oh, well, this person has a job, so they're not on the unemployment rolls, but also their company is saying they're not employees. So that has created, the precariat, which is a vocabulary word I picked up at one point a couple years ago. Yeah, the precariat is great. As soon as somebody told me there's this thing that this word I can use called precariat, it's like,
game
Jesus,
changer.
It's just a huge chunk of the American economy is a part of this horrible precariat, who don't have any kind of security, don't have any kind of reliability, and people have families that they can't count on having these jobs. And, you just get this feeling that the whole mentality of like move fast and break things that came out of Silicon Valley, the principal thing that they moved fast and broke was 150 years worth of worker protections, safeties, unions, benefits, secure job security, anything. And even, before I went into my forest seclusion to finish the book, Uber and Lyft are out there threatening to shut down in California because they can't pay their quote unquote not actually employees a wage. Okay, so this is the economics of America in 2020. This is I don't think that people ever recovered from 2008, and I think that then have just been leveled by this second meteor strike. We had one, we were wobbling, and then we got blasted again by COVID. So,
and also something that, sorry, just really quickly,
and jump in whenever you want. If you ever want to break up this monologue.
No, it's great. I'm totally enthralled. But it's interesting that and it's so funny that this isn't getting more coverage, but how climate change also did contribute to COVID. And it's weird that I don't know, Dems should be, well, whatever, various reasons they're not, but that really is, it's funny how little attention that's received, because that is such a great opportunity to warn against that. Right. Yeah, because the bats, crazy bats.
An ineffectual opposition.
Yes, right. That's yeah. Is that on the list? Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's see, where was I?
You were I think you were going into number 3.
Well, yeah. They are technically numbered, but also so we're also dealing, and I haven't checked back on this, but there was some effort, in the early summer to do some unemployment benefit bonuses and give out some money. It was, entirely too little. It was entirely too late and lasted entirely not long enough. Which is the kind of thing that you see, again, if I was writing an episode, you would say, okay, you have this massive economic crisis and you have the powers that be saying okay, kicking and screaming, we will be dragged into giving you some money that did kind of help. There are good indications that actually really did help. Literally just putting money in people's pockets, which is something I'm very much in favor of. Just direct cash infusions. But then they just have since walked away from it. And there were eviction moratoriums, right? And those eviction moratoriums are going to start to wind up. And when are they going to start to wind up? They're going to start to wind up in the fall of 2020, leading into this, leading into this election. And again, that's the same way that we were, we're dealing with an economic crisis that's coming on top of an economic crisis that we already hadn't gotten out of, which was 2008, homelessness and houselessness and people losing their homes and not being able to afford homes. This has been an issue that especially the coasts have been dealing with for 10 years. I'm from Seattle originally. I don't live there anymore. But I lived in Seattle. I lived in Portland. I've spent a lot of time in Vancouver. My family is from San Francisco. My mom is from San Francisco originally. So I've been to all these places. Vancouver, BC.
Yeah.
Right. I went to.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I remember you said. I remember that. Yeah.
It's like even the Canadians are dealing with this, right? There is there is a
Vancouver, Washington, right?
There is a Vancouver, Washington.
But you're BC. You're talking about
just over from Portland.
Yeah.
But we were already dealing with housing crisis. And this is all just making all of those things worse. And that's what happens when I say, these things need to come together in a certain way. It's making things that were already bad even worse, right? Things aren't getting better. Things are being worse. And all of this would be bad on its own, but it's hitting things that were already quite terrible, like insecurity and inability to do all these things. So what the heck is next on my list? I did actually make a list. Oh gosh, yes. Who are the ones who are feeling all of this the most? It's anyone under the age of 40 years old.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a generational divide that has been growing up, and I think again was exacerbated by the experience of 2008, where if you had kind of already achieved a certain level of job security and financial security and owned a home and had gotten to a certain point in your life, you were able to ride all of that pretty easily. If you were under the age, today under the age of 40, so back then if you were 30 and below, trying to make your place in the world for anybody under the age of 40, start a family, buy a home, have a career, climb some kind of ladder to advance beyond just entry level nonsense, or advance beyond just like a gig economy where everybody is told, oh, well, you prize flexibility. Didn't you know that? And it's like, I don't prize flexibility. I prize knowing that I'm going to have a paycheck, and knowing that I'm going to have a job, and knowing that in 5 years, maybe I can be higher and have more responsibility and more money than I do right now, which I don't think is the experience of most young people. And by young people, I mean people who are 33 with 2 kids, which is, people talk about millennials to this day. And by people, I mean baby boomers. Baby boomers still talk about millennials like they're, 18 years old. And it's like, millennials are, 35 and they've never known this thing called the American dream, of which you speak, which is, go to university, get an education, find a wife, find a husband, get married, have kids, get a career, buy a home, move up in the ladder wherever it is, and obviously we're not doing, spend 30 years at the same corporation anymore. But you, at least when you leave one place and go to another place, you're moving up. You're taking a higher position. And not only are we not seeing that, but we are seeing jobs being shed, people being laid off. What kinds of people are being laid off? Journalists are being laid off. It is a bloodbath out there for journalists. And, this is one of those things where I haven't done a revolution that doesn't involve a lot of really pissed off journalists.
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
And on top of that, a group of educated people, because I mean, it's the highest university rates, highest college graduate rates of practically any generation, highly educated, but not left with anything that is satisfying or dignifying. Didn't
they do the study about suicide bombers, I think, or that like people expected, the kind of your intuition or would suggest, oh, if you're a suicide bomber, you come from like the most desperate, the poorest, you have nothing to lose. But they found that, like, not surprisingly, and this does relate to what you're saying, the people most likely to become suicide bombers are people who experienced kind of a gap, an expectation gap, right? So they moved from like the countryside into the city. They were the first college educated in their family, and then they don't have so they experience some upward mobility, but not as much as they were promised.
Right. I have also seen those things, right? Where it's not just like poor people coming out of the slums doing this, right? Exactly. So it can be
radicalizing, is I guess.
Yeah, can be radicalized, and also, I mean, what we're talking about here is just like, what is the collective amount of stress, insecurity, anger, and fear that is growing up out there. And I think that it has been growing for a decade or more. I mean, you can trace these things back further than that, but let's just say a decade or more, that are now being even more acutely felt right now. And I feel like every time I open up, social media, I'm looking at somebody else who just lost their job.
Yeah.
And this is somebody or left the industry, or